we have this North Star where we believe as a team, the mission is to get all Gen AI answers with attribution and with fair share of revenue. That's our North Star.
Hello, and welcome to the Media Copilot. It's a podcast that explores how AI is changing media, journalism, and content creation. I'm Pete Paschal, longtime tech journalist and founder of the Media Copilot, and I'm excited to bring you fascinating conversations with fellow journalists, media executives, and the people building how the business of news will work in our inevitable AI future. So I'm thrilled this week to talk to Annelies Jansen, who's the Chief Business Officer of ProRata AI. ProRata was founded by investor Bill Gross, who wanted to do something about AI companies building their large language models on top of what he describes as shoplifted, plagiarized content. ProRata has the ambitious goal of fixing this problem. How? Well, by establishing an entirely new way of tracking AI-generated answers to their source material, which is often original reporting from publishers. As anyone who reads my newsletter knows, I'm really fascinated by this layer between AI engines and publishers, and ProRata aims to be the biggest player of all in that space. Not only do they have a novel technology, they have dozens of publishers signed up already, including the Financial Times and Axel Springer. And they also have their own search engine, Gist, which has access to all the content from their publishing partners. The whole idea there is that it's a white label solution for anyone who wants to develop AI on that content. You've just got to pay for it. ProRata isn't alone in trying to do this. As Annelies and I discuss, there's a whole constellation of startups trying to do something similar. Do they compete or do they cooperate? It comes up. Really, it was a great conversation. And spoiler, we go out on a high note thinking about what a well-mediated AI internet would look like in 5 years. If you do enjoy the podcast, I'd encourage you to share it with a friend or a colleague, and I'd be grateful if you'd consider subscribing to the Media Copilot newsletter if you haven't already. I'd also really appreciate it if you'd leave a rating or review in whatever podcast app you're in. Those really do help the show get in front of more people. Lastly, you can check out everything we offer, including AI training classes for media, marketing, and PR professionals at mediacopilot.ai. Okay, now here's my conversation with Annelies Jansen of ProRata. Annelies, welcome to the Media Copilot.
Hi, Pete. So great to be here.
Yeah, thrilled you could make it. So I'm really excited to talk to you and learn all about ProRata and what you guys are up to. But let's just dive right in. You guys are on a mission to ensure publishers are compensated and attributed for their work when it's harvested by AI. That's sort of the broad strokes of it. But give me like what your interpretation is, what that looks like, and what that looks like in practice.
Wonderful. Thank you, Pete, for the opportunity. So at Parata, we're on a mission to make sure there's fair compensation on all Gen AI outputs, on all Gen AI answers, fair compensation for the original content sources used to generate the answer. That's kind of the headline. So how do we
Mhm.
do that? Very simple. If you can count it, you can share it. And there is no way to count the contribution in Gen AI, and that's what we're building. So our attribution system is able to dissect based on licensed content that we have agreement to use, is able to dissect any answer and then share the revenue between all contributing content sources to generate that answer.
So can I double click on that just a little bit? So because we're on a podcast and I want to get a little bit in the weeds on this stuff with you because I like to nerd out about it. So even though an AI chat interface or a search for a user, I don't think the distinction between what's in training data and what you might call RAG is probably kind of lost on them. Like there's a difference in that. I sometimes point to, hey, something like I used to point to Chat GPT before they had search, and now I point to Claude and say like that's going into its knowledge base. Basically what it was trained on. If you ask it a question about facts, like what was the French Revolution caused by, and it'll sort of give you some interpretation of that. And then if you look at something like Perplexity, it's similar in terms of experience, but somewhat different in terms of what's going on under the hood, because in that case, it's looking at search results and it's bringing back its interpretation of those results. And there's, I don't want to get too into the weeds and get into the technologies and the schema. That's for a developer podcast, but I do think that distinction is important to what you're talking about, like properly attributing the answer. Because my understanding, again, I'm not a developer, and maybe you probably talk with more developers than I do, but in my understanding is that the figuring out where a knowledge-based answer comes from is probably harder than a RAG or search answer. So, can you, to the extent that you guys have figured it out, like how does that play into an attribution scheme that you guys are doing? Scheme. Didn't mean to use the word scheme. An attribution paradigm, I should say.
A new economic model. And so that's kind of where we started. And as you know, Bill Gross, founder of our company, he built 150 models. One of his sweet spots is really understanding where do we need a systematic approach? Where can we build a new model? And when he started to dive into AI and he read the New York Times lawsuit, he realized that this is not a model. If you need content, you need quality content in order to build AI search. Um, there needs to be an agreement on how that content can be, how one can be compensated for that content. Today in the market, we have some licensing deals and we have some lawsuits, but that
Hmm.
doesn't cover the long tail of content, and it will never cover the long tail of content because the large language models, but they're not able to negotiate with every individual content creator on how to pay out for the contribution of that knowledge based answer. And that's why Bill decided to build a new economic model and start on the other end, basically to say,
Hmm.
how can I build a knowledge graph using a RAG store to generate answers using content that I have access to? So we're building a RAG based system with content we have access to. We don't
Right.
crawl it, we don't scrape it. We have agreements to use that content to generate answers. So you almost start on the other end of the spectrum, which is a clean rag store with a knowledge graph that builds these answers. And because we have access to the content and the rag store with unique claims using style words and a number of additional vectors, we're able to attribute the content used for that particular answer.
Cool. That makes sense. I like the term rag store, by the way, even though that it conjures up sort of images of like tattered things in the window that you might want to buy. But rag store is very cool. And how many publishers have you made agreements with so far?
Over 50. We've got over 400 titles right now. There's about 100 standing in the, I wouldn't say in the queue, well, sort of in the queue.
Right.
There's a
Chatting
lot of,
with, I guess.
yes, absolutely. And so we're very almost overwhelmed with the interest in working directly with publishers, but also content aggregators. There are a number of associations who've reached out to us. And frankly, we're a small and mighty team, and very encouraged by the response in the market.
Nice. So, would you say that's been your biggest challenge? Has it been that there's been so much interest it's hard to keep up, or what other challenges are there in sort of getting more people on board? Because like while hundreds of titles sounds great, just kind of curious, as particularly if smaller publishers are listening, wondering, hey, how can I get in on this pro rata thing? I know it's baby steps, but tell me about the challenges of trying to build a platform that's trying to solve a very big problem in content.
Well, yeah, and you refer to it, solving a very big problem. Um, there's not just one challenge that we have. There are a number of challenges. The approach we've taken is we have this North Star where we believe as a team, the mission is to get all Gen AI answers with attribution and with fair share of revenue. That's our North Star.
Hmm.
You get there. At the moment in the market, there is no acknowledgement that attribution is actually possible, and there's no willingness to start to pay out content contribution based on a pro rata usage. That system doesn't exist in the market. So we decided, like I said earlier, to start almost on the other end of the spectrum, which is let's build our own B2C model called Gist.ai. And with that product in market, it's an AI search engine only using licensed content with fair compensation,
Hmm.
based pro rata attribution for each answer, um, and to build awareness within the market and within the publisher ecosystem that attribution is actually possible, and we can actually pay out, and we will also drive traffic back to the original content source. Simple approach.
Hmm.
Second, the most asked question from publishers, there's a number of them. One is, how easy is it to work with you? What does it mean? And publishers across the world have built content feeds into whether it's MSN or whether it's Apple News or
Right.
so that's it's a market motion that's recognizable, and they've got the operating system in place to actually feed content into our database to be used for the rag store. Then the second question is, how am I going to make money? We understand that your payout is 50-50, 50 for the platform, 50% for content sources. 50 of what? And then we
Right.
um,
Good question.
and the answer is we're building monetization around our
Yeah.
B2C product, but we're also building monetization around distribution of our B2C product within the partner ecosystem. So we're building distribution within our own B2C brand, but we're also building distribution using our partners' audience to leverage their need for AI search and also their need for monetization. So
So
our
so that's great, but what does that look like, right, in practice? Is like if someone does want to do that, offer AI search, and are you talking about exclusively publisher partners or honestly just anyone tech partners that might be interested in an AI search engine capability of which there might be many different sort of applications of. Um, is that do you have any partnerships that are at that level yet? Are you still building that? I'm just kind of trying to think about like what does it look like if Gist succeed? Obviously, Gist is a website, but it's like I don't. That's obviously not the primary model, right? This is a thing that essentially you've described a white label situations like okay, you have access to all this content. I want to use that in some application. Would that be sort of all these mini gists all over the place? How does that work? And could they all be different flavors, I guess, with a different set of content?
Because the AI search capability with attribution with monetization can unlock Gen AI engagement opportunities across the network of our partners. Some partners are building chatbots, some partners are looking at very specific applications of AI search within their own media channels. um, I think taking it one step back, we're building
Okay.
this with partners. That is our focus. We're building technology that helps content creators across the world get fair share of revenue in the age of Gen AI. So we're building, you asked about solving problems. We're actually solving these problems and what are hardest problems working with the ecosystem. So our 50 launch partners are really important for us, not just for content, but they're also sparring partners with us to help to inform us what's important for them and what kind of data would they like to have, very simple, but also how we can work with them to unlock that monetization within Gist.ai, but also unlock that monetization within their own media channels, within their own media products. There's a real need for AI search, but there's even more need of what does that mean there's
Hmm.
more need to answer the question, what does that mean, AI search within
Right.
my own media channels? And that's where we work very closely with partners. To give you an example, we signed an agreement with Lee Enterprises for a large local newspaper publisher in the US. They're active in 71 markets. They have over 300 titles. And we are developing um, a roadmap on how AI search can play out within their titles, how AI search can play out across their titles, how their content can be displayed in the best possible way within Gist.ai, because we look at this as a flywheel. They're not
Mm.
standalone properties. Gist.ai is our B2C product, and it's awesome. It's in waitlist right now, but honestly, once you start to use it, it is a fantastic consumer experience because we have an independent attribution bar at the top of every answer. So as a consumer, we're actually educating consumers that Gen AI answers are made using content sources.
Mhm.
I think that's an education process um, we are engaged in the market where the end user deserves to know this. So working with a partner like Lee, we're looking at this through the lens of it's a flywheel. So
Yeah.
how does Lee's content appear in Gist.ai? What kind of information does Lee like to know about how their content's being used in any particular query? And at the same time, working with them on how we can deploy our technology, our tools, and that is not just AI search, but it's also a new advertising format. How can they best be used across their um, media channels and media products?
Yeah, I think one of the things that all this sort of leads to, what you just mentioned, is the data around all these queries, and given that you're going to have this engine with so many different sources, and sharing the data presumably with the publishers. I feel like this leads to what I sometimes call like SEO for chatbots, and like this becomes like, okay, because you're attaching this attribution and compensation monetization model to it, the strategic desire to want to be in one of these summaries becomes very clear, right? Because right now, without that, it's almost like people sometimes ask me, well, how do I get in these summaries, right? And I'm like, well, why would you want to? And I don't mean to say that of like dismiss it. It's like it's probably a good strategic thing to do, but it is like unless there is a business component to being in these answers, you got to really think about that. So given all that, and that sort of this SEO for chatbots is sort of happening and is destined to happen, are there any early data that you have on sort of what gets into one of these summaries? Like how, like I sometimes struggle to sort of talk about the attributes of a piece of content that would probably be in one of these summaries. Generally, my definition falls around, so make sure it's definitive, so that to leave it out of a summary would be wrong. But that's still pretty vague. What are you guys seeing as sort of on the front lines of this in terms of how that is playing out in terms of what gets quote unquote ranked, I suppose, for a summary.
It's too early to share that publicly, but I think
Mm,
there's
but
something
you're
we
working on it.
absolutely working on it. And I think one of the key things, and I'd like to reiterate that again, is the mission that we have as a company also helped us really to understand like what kind of team do we need to build. Not only a team with incredible deep tech experience, but also a team of people who understand the media ecosystem. And I'm super proud to have to work with a number of people who have deep understanding of media and tech, media ecosystem, and through that lens, we know that when we talk about Gen AI search, we should not assume that everybody has an understanding of what that actually means. So, for a large part, our collaboration with publishers is about education, it's about inspiration, but it's also getting under the hood to understand how can we make this technology work for the publisher so it leads to monetization, but how can we make this technology work for the end user within a media ecosystem, and not just only in gist.ai but also unlock gen ai opportunities within media channels where um, they may where there may not always be the right amount of technology investment or
Right. Yeah. For
knowledge
sure.
base. So throughout my career, Pete, I've worked in media and tech, And I've sometimes described my own role as the United Nations. And I'm like the woman wearing the light blue beret. And I bring together the media executives and the technology opportunities, and you bring those together. And one should never assume that people always speak the same language and have the same understanding. And I think that's what we do with Prorata as well. We spend hours and hours talking
Mm.
to media executives to really understand what is your core need and how can we build something that helps you not only survive the age of Gen AI and like protect yourselves and build up the barriers, but helps you to really thrive. Like
Mm.
help you understand what's the value of my content, how, where, and how, and who should I work with to make sure that that value can be unlocked, but also understood by me to get that to that situation. I like it when you say the SEO of chatbots. I think as an industry, we need to come up with better terminology.
Tell me
Um,
about it.
and
Yeah.
but you know, you I mean, you get the gist. That's
Yeah.
why
Hey.
you totally get the gist. That you know that,
Boom,
and that's
boom.
we're so early.
Yeah.
But whilst being early, I think we have a great opportunity to take experience and knowledge and connections within this media and tech ecosystem to build something for the future and
Yeah.
not
I
just
I I wanted to, ask you some big picture questions, and I want to get into some details too. But it seems like, given what you're talking about, I do want to ask what at least one of those bigger picture ones, which is that as we go forward with this idea of product, I think because what you're alluding to really resonated with me, which is that you often have tech and product, and you have editorial, and having worked served in strategic roles at several places, it's like there is that lost in translation between the two. But I feel like what AI is creating is a bit of a more of a merger between those two things, right? Because the content you're serving up now um, isn't the website is almost like irrelevant. It's going out not just in feeds anymore, but this big ecosystem where AI is harvesting it, right? And so how it's harvesting it, how it's interpreting the facts within those things becomes it matters more than ever and is way beyond keywords. So, I do feel like as a journalist trying to get your stories out there, you kind of have to think about that layer even harder. And that's where product comes in. Anyway, where I'm going to here is like, what happened, like, just given like all the things you think about all the time, how do you see that playing out in the future in terms of like the future of the website? And then what does that even mean for the future of storytelling? I know that, you're more interested in building this marketplace and stuff, but it is a thing I think about a lot in terms of like how people, journalists in particular, like should think about the information they're putting out there.
yeah, and the understanding that that information is how that information is being consumed is different for each and every one user you're trying to reach. So I think we're moving into a world where the AI tools help us to be um, teach us and help us to be closer and be more bespoke. And usually try to group that under what I think are the decentralized opportunities we have.
Hmm.
Um, and and that's kind of also the story of Prorata. You know, we started not with one big scrape billions of articles. No, we started really focused on let's work with data, let's work with content we know only. Let's
Hmm.
work with content. So in that sense, GIST is a decentralized opportunity, and it doesn't
Hmm.
mean that it's only one location, but it's very focused on one particular area. And you see a number of those decentralized opportunities across the spectrum in the B2B side, where decentralized AI for um, the accountancy sector,
Hmm.
in a way where you can bring data in horizontally and vertical actually together with a bespoke AI agent on top of it. So you have access to
Nice.
data and content you never had before. Um, and I think
Very
that's
cool.
the exciting part. And then educating the people we need so badly, which is journalists, on how what I write will show up in front
Hmm.
of the right person. And I think that's where ProRasa comes in with our a publisher portal, with the attribution we provide, with the data we serve back to the publishers. That is a journey. If there was a silver bullet and a simple answer, it would be here. But it's absolutely a journey, and a journey of collaboration and of sharing as much information as possible to make sure that journalists actually understand.
So I'm curious where you guys see yourselves in sort of the constellation of, I guess, people trying to figure this out. So obviously on one side you have AI companies and AI services. The other side you have publishers. You're obviously this intermediary that's providing a valuable service in between. But you're not the only one, right? There's also companies like Tollbit. There are that are sort of similarly trying to create a way publishers can monetize. There's other companies that are very similar. There's one called Dapier that's trying to create a marketplace, and a few others that are doing stuff either on the tech side or even the bot protection side. There's kind of a constellation of companies in this. I guess you might call the neutral zone in between publishers and AI. Maybe not, but it's like, in other words, is there a world where all of these companies can thrive? Maybe not all of them, but like specifically the ones that we hear about, whether it's Tollbit or others. Is there a world where you guys are compatible as opposed to competitors?
Um, I think we are uniquely placed given with our proposition of building AI tools for the content creation ecosystem for all content creators. And those tools need to unlock new engagement. The tools need to deliver real understanding of how is my content being used in the age of Gen AI. How can understanding leading to be better informed, as well as tools that deliver new revenues. Um, it's hard to talk about all the new tools and new companies that are being created right now in sort of like one sentence.
Hmm.
Um,
We'll use two. Two
let
sentences is fine.
Okay, but I think what I see is unique about us. We're focused on output. We're focused on incremental and new revenue streams. We're focused on this understanding and unlock new engagement. And I think that
Totally.
that makes us unique. Combined with, this incredible team, great experience, and be very mission driven.
So when we're talking about media and revenue, I think we can't not talk about advertising, and I think we haven't talked about it yet. I would like to ask you just how do you see an ad model fitting into everything that you're doing?
I think AI brings incredible opportunities across content creation, and that includes ad creation, but also matching between what the user wants, what the user needs, what the user emotion is, and the kind of ads that needs to be served. And we are absolutely focused on unlocking these opportunities. A team where build build pay per click. We have a lot of
Mhm.
people on the engineering side who've worked on advertising systems. I think there's a great opportunity for advertising to become a lot more relevant than it has been. And even though we think advertising has become a lot more relevant using pixels, I used to sell ads for magazines quite a lot
Mm,
ago and ads for
my
newspapers.
sympathies.
And I often would say from the 80,000 subscribers I had to my magazine, I think I knew more than what the average ad salesperson knows today about their audience.
Interesting.
We used to tell that story about the 24 hours in the day of a day in the life of a men's health reader. And I would know
Hmm.
exactly the kind of products they would wake up with and they would consume throughout the day. And that was the storytelling we did as ad salespeople. And I think we can bring some of that back using AI.
Hmm. Nice. Um, so I'm curious about if you have thoughts on hallucinations and accuracy, just sort of broadly or even specifically. So obviously, you guys have a RAG product. Some of these, like Perplexity, have been accused of not being careful enough, I guess I would say, in terms of what their outputs are in terms of accuracy. Um, it's something that just seems inherent to technology as much as it the technology seems to be improving, right? So, how do you guys deal with that? How do you think about that? How obviously the value of information is only goes as far as how accurate it is. So, how do you think about that with regard to the particularly gist and the product you're serving up?
Um, I think I alluded to earlier, we're in a really fortunate position that we meet with many, many media execs, media operatives, media brands within the market. Um, and one conversation really sticks with me when you talk about hallucination and a chief exec of a media company that shall not be named.
Hmm.
But when we talked about hallucination, she said, "Can I stop you there? I'm on a mission to not use the word hallucination when we talk about Gen AI, because hallucination humanizes AI.
Hmm.
Because effectively what we're looking at is if you use data that you do not understand completely in and out, if you scrape, you take a lot of, you don't just scrape the source that you want to scrape, you scrape a lot of additional data that's not relevant. And some people would call it rubbish in, fake out.
Sure. Yeah.
Just we have quality in, quality out. That's what we stand for.
Kiko. I guess if
And
you're
maybe we
using,
can start, we can continue the mission here to find a
yeah,
different word for the H word.
yeah. Interesting. Okay. I like that sort of philosophical stance that you're taking there. That's cool. So, we're recording this at the end of January. I think I would lose my media card if I didn't at least ask you about DeepSeek and what it seems to represent to AI right now. There's been a lot of excitement, I feel like, on the tech side about what this can represent. A lot of rending of garments on the business side, but on the editorial side, a lot of concern about whether it's you're talking about the model itself, which is open source, or the sort of default one from the lab, which clearly has been tuned to shall we say give a bit of a pro Eastern stance. So again, it's a complicated thing because of all the sort of striations I just mentioned, but it does seem to have really shaken up the space quite a bit, particularly when it comes to the money involved and what is needed. What do you think of what DeepSeek means? What does it mean to pro rata?
Um, I've worked in media and tech for over 25 years. Um, uh, what I've learned is when a new a news issue becomes the story of the day or the story of the next 2 3 days, that is really an opportunity to take a deeper dive, and that's why we need
Hmm.
journalism. And so when there is a hype and it has impacts across the market and everybody talks about it, I'd like it to take a step back, um, because it's very easy to run behind a story without having enough information, and endless um, uh, you get endless headlines being generated without really understanding what's happening. And
Hmm.
I'm not the expert, but I'm waiting for those long reads over the weekend where I get a lot more insight into what's actually happening here. Because obviously, it's not something that's happened overnight. If somebody says there's a 6 million price tag here to what's being developed, I need to know more. I've learned
Yeah.
to not just believe one headline or not just to quote one headline. I need to know more, and frankly, this happened on Monday morning. Or some people. I think
Yeah.
the Economist published an article last Thursday. It's only been a week or
Yeah.
less than a week.
Yeah, by the time this posts, I think it's the whole landscape will have changed. So I appreciate the punt, but let's get a little speculative then, and just like get away from DeepSeek and talk about Prorata and like what you're trying to create. So let's project out 5 years, and what is the long term vision look like when it's realized? What does success look like for Pro Rata 5 years from now?
Success for Parata is when our publishing partners can see a significant impact on their revenues through attribution. That is
Mm.
success. And um, the attribution either within your own platform, your own media channels, attribution through a federated opportunity, as I described with the Lee Enterprises example, um, attribution through within a consortium where a number of publishers come together around build an AI search opportunity together, a, an AI search opportunity using a number of different content corpuses and attribution then identifies the pro rata contribution. Um, that to us is success. Success is attribution leads to recognizable incremental revenue based on pro rata contribution for your AI answers. And that's a long sentence. So what does that mean? We want publishers to be able to report in their P&Ls a line that is this is a new revenue stream for me that was generated through understanding what's happening in Gen AI answers, and whether that's within the large language models that are on the market with B2C products today, whether it's on our B2C product, whether it's within the publisher environment, we're building our product to be able to power across all these channels.
Nice. And so it's not that gist.com replaces google.com then. Although it would be better, it's a better verb than Plex, I'll say that. I gisted it.
Oh, yeah, it's wonderful, isn't it? It's fantastic.
Or I got the gist, I guess is what.
God, did you?
Yeah, maybe
And
not.
it's once you start to once we came up with the name and decided on the name Jest. It is incredible how many times it's being used in our average day to day conversations. I
Oh,
think
with
another
in terms of
thing,
a pun or in terms of actually like a verb, or how does it give an
yeah,
example?
well, I'm sure it's going to be a verb over time. The amount of times people have said to me, and maybe it's because now I'm just more conscious of it, the gist of it. So I'm trying to use it as well. I think one of the things, so you take this 5 years out. We take this 3 months and 12 months out. And what we are very encouraged about is the number of quality news and media organizations, companies who want to work with us. And I by the end of 2025, we will have thousands of titles with content ingested into our RAG store.
Wow. All right. I like leaving it on a number. That's great. Annelies, this has been fantastic. Thanks so much for sharing everything you guys are up to and taking the time out to chat with us here.
Thank you, Pete. I love this conversation. It's really good when we can double down on journalism, quality, new revenue streams, and I really appreciated the opportunity.
I love it. Thanks so much.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to my conversation with Annelies Jansen of ProRata. To learn more about the company, head on over to prorata.ai. And if you like what you heard, just take a minute to leave a rating or review for the Media Copilot in your podcast app. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Media Copilot newsletter and check out mediacopilot.ai for our classes on AI for journalists, marketers, and content creators. Be seeing you in the future.